To my great colleague, the Dr. Meir, Israel's Consul General to all of New England, to the families and friends, to my family and my parents who are here, and to the graduates, Brandeis class of 2010. Congratulations. Mabruk and Mazal Tov. You know, people, especially young people, seem to be fascinated with the fact that I served as a paratrooper. Cool, they say, you jumped out of an airplane. How many times did you jump? And then I hate to disappoint them, because I have to look at them and say, in fact, I rarely jump. Most times, there were these two large gentlemen on either side of the door who pushed me out. Now you too now stand at the door. Outside, the darkness is howling, and you're far from the ground, and you really hope that your chute will properly open. At such anxious times, I think it helps to think back and remember the transformative moments in your lives. Now, we all have these moments, the moments that inspire or motivate us, that animate our dreams. A transformative moment, perhaps, was what brought you to this open door at this moment, standing before the exit. Now, for me, one of those transformative moments was the 1967 Six-Day War. It was an event that many of us in the American Jewish community thought would culminate with Israel's destruction, but instead concluded with Israeli paratroopers dancing in front of the Western Wall, Judaism's most sacred site. Watching that scene, as a kid in suburban New Jersey, I vowed to myself, I'm going to be one of those dancing paratroopers someday. A few years later, while visiting Washington with my Jewish youth group, we were introduced to Israel's ambassador to the United States. I'll never forget this. He walked in, and we applauded him until our hands were numb. We sang Shalom Aleichem until our voices were hoarse, and I said to myself, that is what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be Israel's ambassador to the United States. I wasn't much of a student back then, and I wasn't much of an athlete. I was a triple letter man, but the three letters were A, D, and D. But it was the 70s. It was a time of dreams. A time when an ingenious musician named Paul Simon, this musician, could imagine himself flying. I dreamed that my soul rose unexpectedly, he sang, and looking back down at me, smiled reassuringly. Right after college, I moved to Israel and I joined his defense forces. And that's when I learned that being a paratrooper was not about dancing. Being a paratrooper was about plunging from a plane at a speed that was fast enough, even if your chute did open properly, fast enough to break both your legs. Being a paratrooper, I learned, was about having to make split-second decisions of profound moral consequence. Later, I went to work for the Israeli government at the time of the beginning of an historic process for peace with the Palestinians. That process precipitated protests and terrorist acts in which many people were killed, including my sister-in-law, Joan, who was a visiting American student at Hebrew University. My boss at the time was the same ambassador who had inspired me as a teenager and who is now Israel's Prime Minister. His name was Yitzhak Rabin. And for the dream of peace, he too paid the ultimate price. Transforming your dreams into reality often incurs a cost, especially when those dreams take shape during times of great challenge. As ambassador, I must grapple with issues that affect millions of lives, including the lives of my wife and our 3 children, And frequently I have to face criticism in the media and on campuses. And traveling this great nation, I am not always greeted with songs of Shalom Aleichem. But along with the price, there is the inestimable privilege of serving. Whether as a soldier or as an ambassador, I've had the supreme honor that comes with shouldering responsibilities for one's people and for the causes of security and peace. Now, the connection between realizing dreams and accepting responsibility for them has long been a theme in Jewish history. The Bible tells us of Joseph, the ultimate dreamer. He dreamed his way to a position of great responsibility in Egypt, and then he used those responsibilities for the benefit of his people. But Joseph's descendants were later enslaved and had to wait for another dreamer, Moses, to secure their freedom. And even then, those people complained, we were better off living as slaves in Egypt than we were dying out here in the wilderness. Moses nevertheless carried out his responsibility with pride, and at the end of his life, he entrusted Joshua to guide his people to independence. Chazak ve'ematz, Moses exhorted his young successor, be strong, be courageous. In modern times, the Jewish people's vision of liberty in their homeland, then known as Palestine, was galvanized by the Viennese writer Theodor Herzl. If you will it, Herzl famously said, it is no dream. Now, Herzl was writing during a period of deep despair for the Jews of Europe, confronted with the fiery anti-Semitism fueled by the Dreyfus trial in France. Yet, rather than yielding to that despondency, Herzl created the Zionist movement that inspired millions of people, Jews and non-Jews, worldwide. Dreaming during such turbulent times indeed takes courage. But an even greater battle is required once those dreams are fulfilled. Indeed, Herzl's adage, if you will it, it is no dream, should always be paired with the axiom coined by Herzl's contemporary, the great Irish poet and nationalist William Butler Yeats. Writing at the time of the great struggle for home rule for Ireland, Yeats wrote, in dreams begin responsibility. The dream responsibility nexus was personified by another contemporary of Herzl and Yeats, a towering figure of 20th century American jurisprudence whose name graces this extraordinary university. Like Moses, who originally planned on a career in shepherding, and Herzl, who only wanted to write plays, Louis Brandeis, too, did not at first see himself as a visionary. But like Moses, beholding the burning bush, and Herzl witnessing the Dreyfus trial, Brandeis experienced a transformation. Now, Brandeis was what we used to call a wunderkind. He graduated at the top of his Harvard Law School class at age 20. Don't you hate people like that? But he was no hero at first. He was perfectly content to handle conventional commercial cases. That is until a monopoly tried to take over all of the railroads in the Boston area. Now, those times were also turbulent, but with mass exploitation of workmen and immigrants and women. But Brandeis had a vision of America, a nation in which all citizens, irrespective of their social standing, national origins, or gender, all of those citizens enjoyed an equal opportunity and equal rights. He took on those rail monopolies. He took on the gas monopolies. He went on to secure the rights of women to humane work conditions, and he never once took a fee for that. Brandeis reached for his dreams. And through his dreams, he had assumed immense responsibilities on the highest court of this land.